Okay, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here, really. What's the word for love in your language? Lasko? Is it? Laska. How about Jesus? Yevish. Okay. Very good. So before we begin, any question about you can't sleep last night because of the things that we have said here and you need to really ask the question before we begin. Any question that you have? None? Okay, so we are about to being consistent with the analogy, we are about to give birth to this church. Okay, so we have already done the preparation. We define what kind of personality. We know the direction, the mission statement, the vision that we have. We understand our target group of people. We come up with a system, which we call the discipleship pathway. And for those who are frustrated with the discipleship pathway, actually what Pastor Steve presented yesterday is really a byproduct of a lot of years of trying to understand this. And I was already in my fifth and even sixth year of the church plan that I fully understand this. I was doing it, but I was not connecting it. How we can move an unbeliever, becoming a believer, becoming maturing believer into becoming ministers and workers and then eventually missionaries in the church. That takes a long time, right? And usually you need to stay in the church for a long time for you to see that. For you to see generational discipleship taking place in your church. And usually it takes 4 generations to have a culture of discipleship in the church. It means that Jeff discipled me, I discipled Dan discipled Steve. Those 4 generations should be there before it becomes a culture in the church. Okay? And I have seen that in the church because I stayed in the church for 19 years now, 18 years now. I have seen that, the 4 generation. Wherein I discipled the leaders of the church and then the elders discipling their children, and then their children now discipling the newcomers. And so I have seen that because I stayed in the church. As my professor said, if you want to make an impact in the church, in the community, stay. And when you stay, make an impact. Because you can stay and not make an impact. And one of the things that we'll be studying today is the small group, okay? There are 2 key decisions in the early stage of your church plant regarding the church plant, regarding small group. Number 1, it's about leadership. Is it a solo planter or a leadership team? Some of you, God bless your church planting effort, and you have already 2 or maybe 3 families, and you have a leadership team that will start the church. In my case, I was alone, and I have to build my own team. And so, but it was very clear in my mind that it was not a solo kind of leadership. I need to produce right away the leaders. By the way, Pastor Steve talked about the launch team. Means that sometimes the launch team will become leaders of the church. Not necessarily all of them. Okay, not necessarily all of them. We have to clarify that because you have a very clear qualification of elders in the church, right? What if they're not ready? And one of the biggest things that maybe a characteristic of a leader is that he's able to teach and preach. Now that's maybe a high position, right? An elder of the church is able to teach and preach, especially the doctrine of the church. Is he able to articulate it and defend it? Okay, so in our case, it took us 6 years before we appointed, there were leaders already in the church, but they were not elders of the church. They were making decisions in the church, but they were not fully elders of the church because they haven't reached that position. In some cases, because they have like a team and they are already like mature believers and really good people maturing in Christ, right away after 1 year, they have elders in the church. So again, as I've said, very important to understand this in your mind or maybe even written. Make sure that what kind of leadership team that you're going to have. And then second is about the small groups. What will we use the small groups for? Okay? And that will be answered as we go to the next slide. I love this book, Natural Church Development. And there was a research. I like the book because the guy, Christian Schwartz, did not push any kind of, let's say, methodology. He just asked the question, okay, in our world today, and he went through a lot of continents and also countries, and asked the question, what are the essential qualities of the growing church? Okay? So he was not biased. He was just asking question. Let's say Brazil, at the time in 1980, when he was especially doing some of the research, there were at least 3 countries that was breaking, especially what we call the revival of more than 10 years, Brazil, South Korea, and the Philippines. And he asked the question, what are the essential things happening in these churches? And then, of course, in Africa. And there were 8 things. 1 is empowering leadership. 2, gift-oriented ministry. 3, passionate spirituality. 4, functional structure. 5, inspiring worship. 6, holistic small groups. 7, need evangelism. And number 8 is loving relationship. Usually, the description is the cultural part. For example, worship. No? Is the word inspiring connecting with you? How do you describe your worship here? Good worship, biblical worship. What would be the description that you will somehow describe worship here?
What do you mean by worship?
Worship service. Corporate. Yeah. Is it inspiring connecting with you? Yeah. What else? Living? Lively. Contemporary music? Contemporary worship? Okay. Somebody said, the missiology said, that usually the description is the cultural, and then the second one is the biblical. That, let's say, leadership, ministry, spirituality, worship, small evangelism, discipleship, those are biblical. And how you describe it is your culture. Okay? No. Because in Manila, we'll never use inspiring. Inspiring is perspiring for us. So, we will use high-impact worship. So that high-impact worship is more, we can relate with that. Okay? But in all these eight characteristics, one that is so important is the small group principle. All these group principles are universal, but one principle is most important, the way we observe it, and it is the small group, and we will give you the reasons why. Okay? The larger a church becomes, the more important small groups become for continued growth. That's true, right? I have attended like mega churches in our denomination, more than 1,000 people, and literally after 10 or 15 minutes, nobody is in the church anymore. I call it the hi brother, goodbye brother fellowship. It's like, yeah, they don't connect. No? And so the bigger the church is, the more the small group ministry is vital. The key to multiplication of small groups is the continuing ongoing development of leaders. And the issue here is that do not focus on the small groups itself, but focus on multiplying your leaders, because it's the leaders who will lead the small groups. Okay? It's the leaders who will lead the small groups. So don't be like maybe in your first, second year. Like in our case, we have only one Bible study small group when we started the church. And then after 5 years, we have about 10 to 15 small groups, depending on how. Sometimes we have an 8 to 12 week cycle. So what we have found out is that some Bible study, you'll just say Bible study and just keep on going and going. It doesn't have any impact. But we will say, okay, we're going to have a Bible study for the next 12 weeks, and we're going to talk about spiritual gifts. That has more impact, and we can evaluate that more. Okay, we can measure the success of that. And of course, it depends on the cycle of what we call the calendar. Because in California, when it's summertime, a lot of people travel, which was a big adjustment for me, because in the Philippines, summertime is the high point of ministry. And then I went to California, I was preparing everything. And I was so discouraged, actually. I had to go to therapy for that anyway. And I was so discouraged because nobody was in the church. Half of the members were gone. They were traveling. Yeah. And so I have to adjust to the timetable, and how they conduct the ministry there. But it's very important that multiplication of leaders is your focus rather than the multiplication of the small groups. We're going to talk about what kind of small groups that we're going to have. But the biblical foundation, as we have seen, is in Jesus' ministry. He ministered to the crowd, 5,000 plus. He fed them. He preached the gospel to them. As we can see, there were like what we call the outer followers of Jesus Christ, 70. And then we have what we call the 12 disciples. And then out of the 12 disciples, there were 3 that he really spent time with. That's a big debate about this. Was he specializing on them? Or these 3 would like to just spend time with Jesus Christ? Biblical foundation, as we have seen in the early church, they met in the temple, large group, but also they met in houses, which is considered to be the small group ministry. And throughout the New Testament, Acts and the epistles, we have seen house churches. And again, we are not here to tell you what kind of small group. We're not pushing anything to you to make your church a house church. We're here to tell you that just disciple people, evangelize people. If you come up with a church in the sense that you continue to develop them, that's good. Okay? I just like to make that very clear. Okay? We're not here to say plant a mega church, plant a house church. No. We're just saying disciple people, reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I hope that you are discipling them. I don't know the shape of that ministry. You have to come up with that, what is relevant. Biblical foundation, as we have seen, theology, there's a great commandment for us, and the great commandment of loving one another could be seen especially and be experienced in small groups. Love one another, love your neighbor as yourself. That can be exhibited more and experienced more in a small group. Okay. The one another passages in the Bible, being devoted, bearing one another's burden, be kind and encourage one another, always within the context of a small group. Okay. Historical foundation, as we have seen the revivals, the pre-church has also rich heritage, a rich history regarding small group. We have seen the Anabaptists. They're known for house worship in the 16th century. The Pietists, 100 years later, the foundational to other evangelical groups met in small groups. John Wesley organized small groups, training and discipleship that became the last great church planting movement in the 18th into the 19th century in the U.S. And then it was embryonic as well, or the evangelical free church in Scandinavia during the 19th century. They were called the readers group, wherein they read the Bible in houses. And eventually they became the free churches, and then in the USA as well. Today, church planting movements all over the world emphasize small groups. And again, as I've said, I'll show this later on. Contemporary cultural reality, and then I'll open this discussion later on. Reasons why small groups are desperately needed today. Listen to this because this is very important. People in high-tech world need high touch. Okay, we are so alienated from one another. No. One of the best way to really minister, to make an impact in the lives of people, is to have what we call the high touch. It means that you are present. No? Theologians call this as incarnational ministry. It means that you are present in flesh and blood. No? You live with the people. No? You know their pains, you know their struggles, but also you know how to celebrate with them. You know how to celebrate with them. Also, people who live in a postmodern culture seek authentic relationship. That's one thing about working with the young people. First thing I realize is that you cannot be fake with them. I love working with young people because they're raw and they're like frank. It's like, I don't like this, Pastor Jun. I like this. And they connect with you if you have really authentic relationship with them. Age aspect, actually, that's a big debate now. Oftentimes we have so segregated, especially in America. The young people will have their own thing, and no adult involvement. That's really good. We don't see that in the Bible. No. In the Bible, we see the whole family worshiping the Lord. No. Actually, what's so important with the young people is that they are hearing adult voices. No. Yeah. No. My master's degree is in the area of counseling and how important the voice is, of an adult within the context of a young people's ministry. I was dealing with homosexuality, and one of the causes of why this boy, age of nine, okay, he was already homosexual, he knew it. When I evaluated it, was an absentee father. The father was working in Japan, and one of the solutions is that it's always the woman's voice that he is hearing, the mother's voice. Okay, and so we come up with a solution, approach in helping the boy, and one that is important that I require the father to do is to call the boy every night so that he can hear the voice of his father, a male's voice. Okay, it was really that essential. And in the same way, in the young people, they need to hear adult voices. Literal adult voices, because these young people, they go into their room, right, and just texting, and their crowd is the young people itself, no, and that is not good. In the Bible, it's very clear: the parents, all the fathers, discipling the young people or the young men. Okay, 4 kinds of small groups or even their function. I like this one is evangelism. We call it the open groups. No. You decide right away. As you start the small group, you ask the question, what kind of small group is this? Now, what is the function of this small group? Is it for inviting people, for evangelism? We have done that in the church. So there will be 4 families that are really they have burden to reach the community. And so I came up with this group and said, okay, we're going to have a small group. And we're going to meet twice a month. If there is no new member that will come in, we will not meet. Because that's the purpose for evangelism, right? We have also, of course, a lot of small groups for discipleship. But that one particular group is for evangelism. Okay? So ahead of time, they will text me, Pastor Jun, we don't have anybody, then let's not meet. No? Let's not meet. Because what we have found out, the growth, okay, for spiritual growth, I removed this module in, I convinced Steve to remove this, but we have seen way people grow, and again, it depends on the shape of your ministry, but non-negotiable, okay? Daily devotion with God, communion with God, okay? Weekly worship, okay? You must have at least one ministry in the church, okay? And then you must have fellowship, and that small group, and then lastly is that you must give your tithes and offering. So those three things are non-negotiable. Some people will say, I need 3 groups, small groups, so that I can really feel that I am growing. No, that's not true. You need only one. One that you can lead maybe, and one that will minister to you. We're talking about spiritual growth, okay? Non-negotiable is daily devotion, weekly worship, okay? And that is the corporate worship. Small group, okay? At least you have one ministry in the church or in the community, and lastly, you give. Nobody will grow in their spiritual life until they really submit their finances. We were in Trinidad, Tobago. I was teaching there. A woman approached me and said, can I have lunch with you, Pastor Jun? Yes. You know what? I don't agree with what you're saying because I'm growing right now, even though I don't have a small group. And I said, when you have problems, do you blurt it out to the community? He said, no. So how do you handle your problem and struggle? By myself. I said, that's not the design of God. The design of God is that one another we carry its burden. Maybe you're growing in the sense that you see growth in other areas of that, but that is imbalance. If you do want to have a balanced growth, you must have daily devotion, weekly worship, weekly fellowship, and Bible study, small group. You must have at least one ministry in the church or in the community, and lastly, you must give your tithes and offering in order for you to have balance. Small group comes in, okay? So, very important for us. The second is the pastoral care. Now, the first small group that I have is with the leaders, the elders of the church. And when I say elders, not only the men, and the women are required. Okay, the wife, no, because they minister as a family. Yes, the tip of the spear of the ministry is the husband. But the wife should understand why the husband is absent that night or he's not in the house because he's ministering. No. If the wife doesn't understand this, you know what happened when the husband comes home late? What? They fight, right? Because the wife is left out. She doesn't know her role. No? My wife will always say, when she will be asked or interview or give a testimony about our ministry, and she'll say, I stay in the house, take care of our family, so that June can do whatever God calls him to do. So it's a partnership. No? And we define our role. There are days that I will not be in the house because God calls me to do these things. But you're still part of the ministry, or else I'll have problem, right? No? If I can keep on thinking what's happening in the house, because I have 3 boys, they can burn the house, right? Yeah, they can burn the house anytime. And it's hard to communicate. Brother Irving is a good brother, I found out. My twin sons are profoundly deaf, so we communicate through sign. Found out that his parents are deaf. So, we communicate through sign. And so my wife has to be there to take care. And they cannot go out. For example, they have business in a government office and everything. Nobody will interpret for them. So my wife has to be there. That's my ministry to them. I have to be there to interpret. Or sometimes they are taken advantage of. So, even though they're like 28 years old now, no, but still, it's a very demanding involvement, no, of being a father. One of the twins is married, and their daughter is hearing. So even though I'm a grandfather, I'm like a father because our grandchild is hearing, so we're the one teaching. My wife and I are the one teaching her. No, so well, that's how God calls us. No complain. But what kind of ministries that you're going to have? What kind of small groups that you're going to have? Number 3 is leadership development. One of the first things that I have done for the elders of the church is that I train them how to lead Bible studies and how to preach sermons and how to lead the worship service. And so I have small groups that meet almost every week specifically for that training. We have small groups for discipleship. We have small groups for the young people. And again, as told you 5 years ago, because all of a sudden grandparents are attending our church, we started to have a small group for them as well. And what Pastor Steve mentioned about their parents being afraid of dying, it's very, very true. No, even though they grew up in the church, well, half of them became believers when they came to the church. So it's their first time to hear the gospel. So I have to prepare them for the next stage of their lives. No? And we talk about the grace of God a lot of times. And then number 4 is personal development, life transformation, center for discipleship, spiritual growth, equipping for ministry, and leadership. The result can lead to continuous multiplication, believers, disciples, and leaders. Any question before we go into the practical principles? Yes.
I see that you put quite a strong emphasis on training, preparing, evangelism, counseling, and so on, and leading the worship group. Where and how do you prepare the people how to read the Bible and explain and teach the Bible?
Yeah. In the leadership, the Bible study or small group that we have, that's where I teach them how to lead the Bible study, how to interpret the Bible. We offer from time to time like theological training, so that they'll be able to read the Bible. We have Bibles. We have a training, more on training rather than a small group. How to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. And it took us about 6 months to do that because we were trying to understand each book. And how we should, like, basic things like how we should understand the background, how the words are being connected with one another. So we gave, but mostly the leaders in our church. Good question. Yes.
Which kind of skills you require from leaders?
Leaders?
Which kind of skills you require from them, or which kind of skills you want to develop in them?
Actually, number 1 is teachability. I really don't care if, it's an advantage if they are good speakers, teachers, they articulate. There's no question about it, no? But you know how I choose leaders in the church? If they lead the church. Yeah. Because we'll assign family and say, we bring the food every Sunday, we have food. But also their job is to clean the whole place. And so I observe them, whether they were cutting, if they're really cleaning, if they really have servant attitude. The second thing that I look for leaders, teachability, servant attitude, is if they give their tithes and offerings. Because giving tithes and offerings is really a sign of maturity. Yeah. And then of course you look at the family, because they will be put on the difference between a leader and a member of the church is like a wristwatch and a wall clock. Leaders are wall clocks. People look at you, right? If you have a faulty wristwatch, it's only you that will have problem with that. But if you have problem with the wall clock, then a lot of people will be affected. I think that's the pressure of being a leader. And then the other aspect is that they should really live out our mission and core values. That they really agree with that, because for example, when we started, many people were pressuring me to have a building, that we'll set aside money for building. Right away I said, this is one of our fights in the early church, beginning of the church, because I said, if we're going to do that, we're not going to plant churches. So right away, we made the decision as leaders. I said to them, we're not going to build buildings here. We're going to plant churches here. So the 18 years, we've been renting. We're not, or else we cannot plant a church because we don't have enough money. And then some people, every year we give our financial, and there was 40,000 after 3 years. They were able to save money. And they said, why don't we just use that for building? No, I said, this is reserved for church planting. We're going to bring somebody from the Philippines, a family, and that's expensive. And so that, again, core values makes your decision easy because you know where you're going. Yes, Steve?
Yes, and that's an example how core values are driving the ministry rather than, the passionate desire of a few people to do something.
Yeah.
And what you're doing there is very countercultural to a Filipino ministry where the church building is almost always seen as essential.
Yeah.
But your core values have driven you, and your mission have driven you to do it in another way. And you have reason for it because you've been establishing the credibility of your core values as you come along.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And also, we would like to have it less churchy in the sense. This is our ideal setting, to be honest with you. Tables and because for the Roman Catholic, it's hard to jump, right? You bring them, you bring them out of their church, and then all of a sudden you put them in an institution church. It's a big jump for them. But if they go to a coffee shop and worship there, that's not a big jump for them. If they worship in the house, that's a big jump for them. Baptism is a big jump. Okay. To me, that's really a sign. In our culture, it's really a sign that they let go of their Roman Catholicism back then. So we try to tone down the churchy aspect. As Luther said, we would like to have a religion-less Christianity. So we would like to have that so that the transition will be easier for them. I love church like big ones. We were in Vienna. Oh, my heart was swelling because we're going through this Gothic church and all the organ, everything, no? Because it creates awe in you, right? No? I don't know, but for me, it created. And I love bringing my children to these big churches because they've been to this kind of church, like a coffee shop. I like to create in them an awe, and so that's I like that. But it will be hard for people to transition from the Roman Catholicism to the Christian church if all of a sudden they are switching religion, rather than switching from religion to relationship. Because that's what we're bringing to them, right? Relationship rather than religion. And so that's one thing that we would like to highlight. Any more questions? Yeah, they were surprised that that's our approach of ministry. We don't like buildings. Go. Yes.
In that case, it's danger that these people will continue to go to the Catholic temple and visit your coffee shop worship. Right? Yes, because they will tell themselves, I will continue my religion.
Yeah.
I will visit your coffee fellowship.
You're very observant. I like it. Yes. And it will take some time for them. I had a Bible study with this group. Their children attended our DVBS, summer vacation, presented the gospel, they became believers. I entered their house for Bible study. And they have human-sized icons, because they are direct descendant of the first Filipino saints, so they take pride of that. And these icons were blessed in Rome. Okay? So I went there, had Bible study, and we have, of course, coffee and snack afterwards. After 3 months, the wife said to me, Pastor Jun, you're not the first pastor that had Bible study here. But you're the first pastor who doesn't say anything against our icons. And I said, because that's not my problem. If you think this will sustain you spiritually, I don't have a problem with that. My duty is to teach the Bible. After 3 months been teaching, entered the house one time, there were no icons anymore. I said, what happened? She said, it's not feeding us. It's not the real thing. Brother, this is the religion of their parents and parents and parents. If you pressure them right away to conform their actions and the way that you worship without changing their beliefs, that is shallow conformity. Change their belief first with the Word of God, and then let them decide whether the icons. I have members, they're going to Roman Catholic in the morning and then the afternoon in our church. And I say, the only thing that I require them is that don't give tithes there. Here. Okay, so you can attend, okay? And they invited me and I go there, but I said, there's one thing only, I cannot take communion, okay? I cannot take communion because I do not agree with their view of theology, but I will attend with you. If you would like your child to be dedicated in the Roman Catholic and you want me to be a principal, no question. I can even marry you in the Catholic Church just to show to you how much I love you, but I said, just attend our Bible study because the Word of God will change you. And so after that, we baptized them. On the other end, when I was starting the ministry, we have people in our church we visited. Again, they have icons. And one of the leaders said, these icons, this is idolatry. You know what happened after that? We were not invited. No, we're not. So, if God has been patient with us with a lot of things, let us be patient with these people as well. Because to them, it's been generational to them. That's how they worship. No? And then you want to change them because they accepted Christ. Every day they accepted Christ through the communion. So, what's the difference? So, always use that illustration to show to you that first, you have to trust the Word of God. It's doing its job in their lives. Second, you need to be very patient in seeing real change in the lives of people. And again, small group will be the best context of that. Yeah. Somebody raise their hands here. Yes.
This was before I was called to Japan.
Yes.
I had Bible studies and I baptized a number of Roman Catholics, even though they continued to go to church just like you.
Yeah.
I just kept exposing them to the Word of God.
Yeah, the disciples, they were believers already, and yet they didn't agree with Jesus Christ to be the Messiah who will die on the cross. Now tell me, isn't the cross the center of our theology? And yet Peter misunderstood it, right? So, okay. Yes, Dad. Go ahead, Dad.
I just want to confirm what you're saying in your process. You don't have to come over.
No, I really like you, so I'm going to get water, and then I will listen to you. Because there is new... Okay, go ahead, my friend.
I was just going to simply confirm what you're saying on the process in dealing with Roman Catholic. I grew up Roman Catholic, like a German ethnic Catholic group in my country, and my wife's Italian Catholic.
Italian?
Yeah, that's even worse. We've had a lot of family arguments over the years with our in-laws and stuff. But one of the things we realized even in our ministry, Catholics would come to our Bible studies we might be doing, and they might come to a fellowship group or whatever you call it, and we just let them come.
Yeah.
They're doing both things and all those things, but we really believe that the power of the gospel in their lives is going to change them. And they're going to start asking their own questions. You don't have to attack it. And all of a sudden, they may be sold on Mary, and they come to the Bible study, and they want to tell you all about Mary. They look around and realize, well, no one else seems excited about her. Yeah. And then you start studying the Bible, and after a while, they're the ones that have to ask the question, how come you guys practice communion? Because that's a good question. And then we look it up in the scriptures together. But let them drive it, and let the gospel do its work. Yeah. So I agree with you.
Okay? So what happened to those people that you baptized? Did they remain Catholic?
Actually, no, they did not.
So they left the house? Yeah. You see? I think the underlined words there are period of years, right? It doesn't come like... Right? There are some. Right away they become believers and then left the church, no? And that's good. But there are people also that it will take 3 years before they will leave the church. And you have to be very patient with them. Or else, again, I've said this, you'll be pressuring them and they will try to conform with you, but they will conform with you because you are the pastor or you pressure them. Not really, they are convinced in their mind, in their hearts, that it's really wrong to worship that way. Okay, practical, no more questions? Practical, did you get my, okay. Small group principles. Don't divide groups, multiply them. Need to talk about this all the time from biblical and ministry priority perspective. Okay. Prototype first group as learning lab. No? You show it to them. No? We were. Are you going to talk about apprenticeship, Steve?
You can talk about it.
Okay. We have a process of apprenticeship, what we call I do, you watch, we talk. I do, you help, we talk. You do, I help, we talk. You do, somebody else come in, I watch, we talk. So it's like, it's not right away we give it to you, but we would like to show it to you. So the laboratory that you have, the prototype that you have will be a learning laboratory to show to them how it's being done, how you care for one another. Some other small groups, they really call the leaders to be the pastors, the shepherds of that small group. No? That they're the one who's really taking care of them. And this is what we have seen is that there is really a high growth of what we call the multiplication because it's being done by lay people. By the way, there is no revival. No, there is no revival no, without lay movement or lay involvement. No. There are three things that I have seen as when I study revival around the world. There were three things that's very important. There is the saturation of the Word of God. There is an excessive preaching of the Word of God. And there is the involvement of the lay people. Those three things are always present in all the true revivals in the world. Okay? Preaching of the Word of God, prayer, and then the involvement of the lay people. That's why the small group is very important. And we call it the non-negotiable. Okay, so you train them how they can. Really, one of the joys that I have is that when I visit a sick in the hospital, that sick person will tell me, "Oh, by the way, Elder so and so visited me already." I love that. For me, that's really it means that they're doing the ministry, right? They're doing the ministry. Yes, Pastor Steve.
Yes, I'm just thinking on that process of you showing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're discussing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they help.
Yeah.
You do it, but they help.
Yeah.
And you go through that process where they help, and you help them later, and then you watch them.
Yeah, yeah.
And that can be done in every single group.
Group. Yeah, definitely.
It can be done all through the church in every aspect of leadership. So the best way to build the next generation of leaders, you might have some training things also, but the best way to do it is have apprentices in every place you can.
Yeah.
So that you're building people in the pipeline to come behind you.
Yeah.
And then you can send some of them out to plant churches.
How does Jesus Christ train the disciples to become leaders? You know how? He puts them in the boat, and then he created the typhoon, right? That's how he trained them. Yeah. You know, it's coming out now that all the trainings that you're going to for leadership is not working because you do not practice it. The best training is that I teach you one thing, you use it 10 times, we come back and we talk about it. I give you another thing and then you use it. That is, if you can balance that of training and then deploying, that is the best. Believe me, that is the best. Because oftentimes that we have all this knowledge, right? But we are so skinny because we do not exercise. But our head is like, yeah, you know all the theologies and so on and so forth. But ask them, do you have any ministry? No. Right? So you teach them one thing and then apply it. You come back. You talk. That's by the way one missing aspect. The we talk. That is something new to me when I just started this church, because I don't have problem with Pastor Steve. He has a problem delegation. I love delegating. Okay, my problem is that I did not follow up. He did not talk afterwards. Now the follow up is very important. No? I told you that I prepare my elders how to preach. One of the joys that I have in the church is that in our church, the high schoolers can preach. Yeah, yes, I have 3 guys who I train. These are second year. When he started, this is a real worship. And then he'll stand up and preach. Second year high school when he started. But he has the gift. Okay. And then up to his college years, he's been preaching in our church. The neat thing was that after I prepared them for 6 months, they have practice preaching. We video it. We invited the whole congregation. Yeah. And that way they will be exposed, and ask them also to evaluate. So everybody in the congregation has a paper, introduction, the voice. Yeah, we do that. And then we tell the truth in love. Okay, you'll say, oh, you stink in this aspect. But we love you, okay? We love you so much that we would like for you to improve, okay? But that was so bad what you said. Don't say that again. And then, but we always I set it up, no? And then one time I preached, they evaluated me. That was not fun, but the disrespect, I cannot take. Anyway, so that was the fun thing. So when we had a mission trip, what Dan was saying, so we had a mission trip in 2012 with these young people, 12 of them. I was not the one preaching, they were the one preaching. So I was good. That was... Again, my gift is discipleship. I mean, I can stay in front, no? But what the joy to stay at the back and see them doing it. I have more joy of that, to be honest with you. And that's why coaching to me is a niche that somehow opened a big ministry for me, because it's not about me, it's about you. It's not about me, it's about, I like for you to grow. And the neat thing about my life to your life, not my notes to your notes, is that God will open door. Because my notes to your notes, you'll be limited, right? But my life to your life, God will open it. God, I mean, they will reach beyond maybe what you were not able to reach. But they will grow beyond, because that is the setup that you have made in the church. Okay, decentralized care. We were just talking about Rick Warren collapsing in his first year of pastorate because he was doing everything. No, do not do that. Do not do that. One, it's going against the design of God, and it is very unhealthy for all of us. So decentralize the care. No, and again, when you train people, you give them authority. You give them also the margin to commit error. That's why we talk is very important. No, expect them to fail. Expect them to fail. As church planters, we will fail. You love snow hill skiing. There's a saying that if you do not fall, you do not ski, right? Yeah. If you're afraid to fall, then you're not doing it. You're not attempting. You're not risking. So failure is part of the ministry. And that's why we have coaches to help us to navigate, especially during the time of our failures. Simplify the structure. Again, we have a saying, you know what KISS stands for? KISS? Keep it simple, sir. You're expecting the opposite, huh? That word is not a good word in our culture. It took me a while to say that. Yeah, but saints. Okay. This is what we have done, especially one of the things that we observe about the movements in the world is that they simplify it. If it's not simple, it's not transferable. Okay? So what happened, this is the reason why we would like for you to come up with a simple definition of your mission and core values. Because if it's complicated, they will not remember it. Yeah, they will not remember it. Before we teach this in our denomination in the Philippines, we asked the president, do you have a mission statement? Yeah. What is it? I don't know. Because it's complicated, it's long. So he had to go to the office and get it and read it to us. He doesn't know the mission statement by heart. No? By heart. Here's the thing. You should know it by heart, church planter. Your leader should know it by heart. And then your members should know it by heart. Because they should know where you're going. Now, where you're going. So that staff, actually, again, I've said, we have a simple statement. And it took me a few years to really come up with it. And half of it I copied. So don't look at me as a smart person. I'm not a smart person. I just project to be smart. But I copied half of it. Really, I copied and said, this will work for us. This will work for us. Okay? So simplify the structure again. Have you heard about the sermon-based Bible study? This is the reason why Dan was saying to me when he gives his sermon, he doesn't give out flyers or the sermon outline. I gave sermon outlines because we use it for Bible study small group. And that's the only reason why I gave it to them, because after 1 week, 2 weeks, we're going to study the same sermon that I preach from the pulpit, and that's time they're going to somehow interact with the sermon. That helps, especially if your resources are limited and materials are limited. And so you can have a sermon-based Bible study based on the outline that you have. Okay, what we have found out, especially in the provinces who don't have access to libraries and bookstores and materials, the sermon based. And the neat thing about it is that everybody is talking about it as a church. So the pulpit somehow dictates what are the things that you will be talking in the next few months as you preach the topic. Open groups produce greatest numerical growth. Closed group produce greatest spiritual growth. Okay, so you see the difference? If it's open, you invite people. When it's closed, it's more like ministering to one another, right? Both are important. The danger is when the small group become inward-looking. Let me repeat that. No? Because I had an experience that we had like a purpose-driven Bible study small group, and there were 8 groups, and then there's a time frame. And then we said, okay, it's done after, I think, 8 weeks or 9 weeks. But this group continued. Yeah, one group continued. I didn't know it. No? They continued. And they become inward-looking now. Now their pain is more important than reaching the people. They keep talking everything. No? Eventually, they left the church. The whole group left the church. No? And so be very careful about this in the sense, I'm not saying control it, okay? I'm just saying that make sure that it is Christ-centered. That's a challenge that we have for our fellowships. We have fellowship. You don't need to tell us to have fellowship because we have fellowship as immigrants in America. The problem is it's not Christ-centered. So gossip will come in, criticism of others will come in. Their pain is more important rather than serving one another. So you just have to be conscious about these things. Okay, so open group or invitation. Could it be a combination? Yes, no problem about it. But as I've said, eventually you have to decide whether it's an open group or a closed group. Number 7, apprentice leaders, natural leaders, training environment. There are people who are gifted to care, right? Because it's a gift. No? So maybe these are the best people that can be a care group leader. No? Small group, optimum size determined by the culture in which they are formed. When I was studying this, especially small group, we were living in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay. And they have and this is a mega church, they have about 40 to 50 small groups. No? And it depends on what the number of the small group was. They have a dance small group. Yeah. They have pottery small group. One pastor even joked, is there anything there biblical that you study? Because it was, but it was an open small group so that they can invite new believers. Okay. In that context, friendship is so important. And so they don't break the group. Yeah. because that's where they create friends. In Singapore, they have what I call the militant small group. When they come, they will say, okay, 5 of you or 10 of you will become small group. After 6 months, you have to divide it because it means that you're growing. It was a militant small group, we called it. No? That it's very clear that multiplication is the number one thing. And that's how the church grew. Actually, it's a mega church in Singapore. No? But that is one model. And then the other model is what I called in San Francisco. They call it the open market cell group, they call it. So it depends on how, because some people will say the best number will be between 6 to 12. And then they found out that it's so hard to establish a relationship and friendship, then all of a sudden you tell them, break it. So it doesn't work in that context, okay? And so they have about 20, sometimes in one cell group, 20 people, 40 people, right? And I don't know how they minister. It's almost going against the small group. So what they do is that they will have also like a monthly meeting and then also weekly, and they will divide it into 4. So that's how they minister. But it's one cell group. Okay, it's one cell group. So again, ask the question, what will work for you? That's all we're saying, okay? That's all we're saying. We're not telling you to be a militant cell group or an open market cell group, okay? We're just asking you, disciple your people within the context of a small group. Okay, we go to the map. Any question before we go to the map? The lecture, I have only 1:52, that 1 minute 52. I'm good, right? And then the map will come in, or map is included?
The map is included.
Okay. So, start now. Pilipinas, Thomas, we don't care what time you begin and what time you end, as long as it's good in between, we don't care. If you don't tell us good story, you stink. 1 hour is okay, right? Being late. In our culture, 30 minutes, you don't need to justify it. 1 hour, you kind of justify it, okay? But 30 minutes, okay, go to the map, decide. Always start with a disciple-making group first. Decide now what you will do to develop disciple-making leaders. Do you have any disciple-making group leaders now?